H2KInfosys provides world-class online IT training, staffing and software testing solutions to customers worldwide. H2KInfosys supports 100% job-oriented training, hands-on project work, cloud test lab, resume preparation and review, mock interviews, robust syllabus. One-time pay, lifetime access to live classes and videos. H2KInfosys has won the trust of thousands of students worldwide. For free demo class, visit h2kinfosys.com.
Okay, so now I'll explain identity column. So using an identity column, you can ensure that a particular column will have some initial value and will be incremented by some fixed value. Now, identity, while declaring an identity column, you have to specify two parameters. One is a seed value and the other one is incremental value. And the third point, when you are inserting a record for the table, you should not mention the identity column name while inserting the records, because your identity will itself take care of that column. Okay, now who wants to explain this identity column other than Kavita? Who wants to explain this identity column? Anyone wants to try? Just the 2 points or 3 points, whatever you understood, you can just tell that to all of us. Anyone wants to try? Okay, so Shweta wants to try. Okay, I'll unmute you. Yeah, Shweta, you can go ahead. Yeah, you can unmute Shweta. You're on. Yeah.
Okay, so identity column has two things in it. One is called seed,
Okay.
and the other one is incremental value.
Okay.
So the first thing is like once we declare our identity column, it will give the value automatically to the column, and the seed will be the initial value, and it will be added automatically whatever the data we define for the incremental value to be added to it.
Yeah, perfect. And yeah, any other things you want to add?
There was one more thing I forgot, sorry.
Yeah, even I forgot. So what is the other point we discussed? Yeah, okay, Kavita wants to try again. Yeah, Kavita, go ahead. Yeah, what we missed actually. Okay, while inserting, right? Okay, yeah, okay. So yeah, thanks Kavita. I have again muted you, put you on mute. So your voice was a bit low. I'll tell what Kavita has told. While inserting a record, we should not put the column employee ID here. We should not put that column, but we can put the other column. Okay, so that is about identity column. So let's go back to the table and we'll try to understand the other things which are there. Okay, so now this column I made as identity because I want this to be started with 1 and to be incremented with 1 again. So and anyway, a primary key itself will not allow null values, so this is of no point putting here. So primary key will not allow null values, so I have added not null and again primary key. Okay, so it's like 2 times I'm telling the same thing. Okay, so this is clear. And last name I have made it as varchar 20, so and not null. So I don't want first name to be null. So that is the use of. So now let's go back here. So now let's try to drop the table again, and let's try to create the table again. So let's try to drop the table again. So when I make this employee name as not null, okay, so I just made this employee name as not null and created the table. Now when I try to insert null value for Meghnad, so when I try to insert null value for employee name, it will throw an error because I have added a constraint saying it's a not null constraint. Okay, so now we saw till now 2 constraints. One is a primary key constraint, and constraint is sense data will have some restriction. So primary key, yeah, I'll come back to this. So primary key employee ID identity column, we are clear with identity column, we are clear with primary key, we are also clear with not null. So first name will not allow not null in this case, last name can allow null values, and one more point which you are taking. So okay, so I got a question saying like every time we make changes in the table we have to drop the table. Not necessarily. So we can use alter table concept, which we'll be discussing in the next class. For today, I'm not telling alter table, but we have using alter you can actually change you can actually make changes to the table. Okay, so we don't need to drop table every time if you make some changes. Okay, now department can allow null values. Okay, now let's try to understand a check constraint. So a check constraint is something like if you want to ensure that, for example, I am applying for a job. Okay, so now I have a table called, sorry, by mistake I executed all of this. So now I want to create a table for job applications. So I'm creating a table, job applications, job applicants, so which will store the details of job applicants. So I'm going to give name, applicant name, varchar 30, and I'm going to give age integer. So now for this job I have a restriction saying like the age should be less than 35. So those who try to enter age value who is greater than 35, I should not allow to insert into this table. So now if I execute this table, create spelling is wrong. Okay, so now if I execute this, I have created the table. Now if I do select insert into job applicants, and I'm writing here applicant name comma age values. If I try to give here Meghna, and if I try to put here 50, so if I try to put a value of 50 here, and if I execute this will allow me. Okay, so now I don't have any restriction for this column now, but I want this column not to allow the values which are less than 30, which are more than 35. So in that case, what I can do is I can add a check constraint saying age should be less than 35. So let me drop the table. Now let's try to create this table with a check constraint. I have a check constraint saying age should be less than 35. So let me execute this and now try to insert the value here with Meghna age 50. So I'm getting an error saying like the insert statement conflicted with the check constraint. So I cannot add value anything that is greater than 35. Okay, so now what I'll do, I'll put the age, my age. So now if I try to execute this, I'm eligible for applying for the job. Okay, so that is the use of check constraint. A check constraint will restrict you with the data. So for this table salary, I have made the check constraint should be greater than 0. Obviously salary should be greater than 0. So okay, so now is it clear about the check constraint? I don't see a single response. Yeah, okay, so now I discussed about the constraint which I discussed about primary key constraint, and I discussed about not null constraint. I discussed about check constraint. So I'm getting a question saying like please explain again. Okay, so the check constraint check constraint is used to restrict the data. So for example, so I want this age column not to allow the values which are okay. Let's take another example. Okay, okay, any other example which you want to share others so that I can explain check constraint other than age and salary? Who wants to explain check constraint? Not with this example, example of your choice. You should explain this check constraint. All of you? you're able to hear me? Okay, so who wants to explain this check constraint other than the example which I gave, other than salary and age, any other? How a credit card information? Okay, Sharon wants to try, so I'll make. Okay, Sharon, you can try. Yeah, you can unmute yourself and you can give it a try.
You add when you're inserting data into a column.
Yeah.
I would use an example like employee ID has to be more than 1001.
Okay, yeah, that's a perfect example.
So when you try and enter a wrong employee ID like 902, it will not insert.
Okay. Okay, I'll explain. I'll explain on that to all the audience. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Sharon. I think that's a good example. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'll explain the idea which Sharon has given. So let me create a table. Create table, for example, say sports. So this is the table which will show the employees who are interested in sports. So this will have employee ID, and so table employee. So we already saw employee table, which is already there with the employee ID, which is 1000 from 1000 onwards. So obviously, if your employee table is having employee IDs from 1000 onwards, your sports also should have employee IDs which is greater than 1000, because you are going to store those employees who are interested in sports. So what you can do here, integer, and you can put here check constraints saying like employee ID greater than 1000. You can put here sport name 100 varchar 50. Now when I create this table sports, so now when I try to add some employee ID which is less than 1000, for example, insert into sports, and here employee ID comma sport name values. If I put here 1001, comma if I put here I'm interested in cricket. Okay, so now when I execute this, it will allow me, because my constraint says it should be greater than 1000. But now when I put here, for example, 900, 995, when I put here volleyball, now when I execute this, the check constraint will not allow me, because the check constraint here says that the employee ID should be greater than 1000. So I cannot insert the record of 995. Okay, that is the use of check constraint. Okay, so the three constraints which we discussed so far are primary key constraint, not null constraint, and the check constraint. Okay, and okay, so now is it clear for all of you what is the use of check constraint? It will just restrict you from entering with some data. Okay, now let's go back to this PDF. Okay, now we have something called small datetime data type. So okay, not null is very straightforward. When you make this column as not null, you cannot insert null values for this table. For example, I made this first name as not null, so when I try to insert null value for first name, it will throw me error. For that reason, for example, all the employees should have first name. Some employees might not have last name. There are chances like employees might not have last name. Do you agree with me? How many of you agree that there might be employees who don't have last name? Yeah, there might be some Chinese or Japanese, like they will only have first names. They might not have last names. They might have only first names. So in that case, that is the reason why I made this first name as not null, but last name can be null. Okay, that is what not null constraint. So when you just make it as not null, it will not allow you null values. Okay, now Okay, so we have something called small date time. So I have written an article long back when I was working in Infosys, so I'll show that to you once. Okay, so now this article is written by me in 2009 22nd February. So in SQL Server, if you want to see the date, if in SQL Server, if you want to see the date, current date, what you can do is you can write select get date. So when you execute this, it will show you the current date and time. So I just executed this. You can see that the current date is 25th May and the time is 6:49 a.m. So which is my time because I'm not in US. So my current time is 25th May 6:49 a.m. Sunday. For you it will be 24th May, and I think it will be 9:20. Okay, so this is about select get date. Okay, select a get date will give you the current date and time, current date along with that time. So when I wrote this article, the date was 22nd. So this is how it comes. Okay, so now date time we have these are the data types which you have in SQL Server. We have bit, tiny int, small int, big int. So these are for integer values, and we have for floating numbers like 10.5. We don't need to know about this one, we rarely use it. So anyway, we'll come back on these data types. For now, let's try to see topic of this discussion, date time. So if you see for date time in SQL Server, so let me tell you what are the columns, what are the data types we have for date time. So we have something called date, we have time, we have date time, we have date time 2, we have small date time. Okay, so these are the data types which we have. Like we saw integer, right? We saw some data types called integer, which will store numbers, and we have varchar, which will store characters. Like that, for storing date we have date column. For storing time we have time data type. So date will only store the date. For example, if you want to store birthday, if you want to store your date of birth, or if you want to store your joining date, or if you want to store anything only date, you can use this date data type. And if you want to store time, only time, then you can use this time column. Now if you want to use date and time both, like how you are seeing here, 25th May 6:50 a.m. so you can use date time. And date time 2 is also used for date and time, but the accuracy of date time 2 is more than date time. So if you see here, I'm seeing here 6:59 seconds 567 milliseconds. So if you want to have the accuracy till nanoseconds or more, then you can go for date time 2. Yeah, get date will give you date and time both. So date time 2 will give you the accuracy till nanoseconds, like 100 nanoseconds. So the accuracy for date time 2 is 100 nanoseconds. So here this is giving, so date time will give you, so let me show that to you. Okay, see here, what is the accuracy for date time? Date time, the accuracy is 3.3 milliseconds. 3.3 milliseconds. And small date time, the accuracy is 1 minute. So for example, let's try to understand this better. Now, okay, I will copy this. Okay, I don't want to confuse you now. Okay, we can discuss more in the next class on this date time, but still see if you can understand. I am declaring a variable, declare @dob, and I'm giving here as date. Okay, so I declared variable as dob date, and select @dob is equal to get date, and then I'm printing @dob. Now if I execute this, so in SQL Server, this is how you declare a variable. So if you already have any programming experience, we declare like this. In C# or C language, we declare like this: int dob, or float age or height. Like this we will do in programming languages like C language, Java, C++, we do like this. But in SQL Server, we have to declare like this: declare @dob. So @ we use for all the variables. So declare @dob, I'm declaring this as date. Now when I do select dob equal to get date, so select or set will assign this get date to this dob, and print will print the dob. So now if I execute this, I can see that I'm not seeing the time here. Why I'm not seeing time here? Because I have declared this dob as date, so it will only give you the date here. Although your get date will give you including time, when you declare this as date, you will see the value only as date. Okay, you're not seeing the time here. Now if I put here as time, if I declare this as time, now when I execute this, I'll only see the time. See, now I'm seeing 6:55, 16 seconds, 213000 something. Okay, this is, so that is use of time. When you want to store only time, better use time data type. When you want to store only date, use date data type. When you want to store date and time, use date time. So when I do this, you can see that the accuracy, so when I use date time, I'm only seeing 6:55 am. So when I use date time, I'm only seeing 6:55 am. So when I execute this again, I'm seeing 6:55 am. I'm not seeing more than this. So when I use here date time 2, see what happens now. I'm seeing here accuracies, even nanoseconds I'm seeing here. So now you are getting date time is less accurate when compared to date time 2. Depending on your requirement, for example, you want to store nanoseconds. For example, you are working for NASA, or you are working for ISRO. In that case, you might be required to store nanoseconds or microseconds, or so when the satellite has reached exact point, you might need to store microseconds. In that case, you will use date time 2 for more accuracy. But if you just want date and time, in that case you can use date time. And if you want only date, you can use date. If you want only time, you can use time data type. And we have something called small date time. Okay, so now let's try to understand what is small date time. Okay, so if you see here, for small date time, the accuracy is 1 minute. For date time, the accuracy is 3.3 milliseconds. Okay, so questions. So which is the date time variable with more accuracy? Which is the date time data type with more accuracy? Date time? No, I'm saying someone has date time. It is not date time, it is date time 2. Okay, date time 2, the accuracy is let me clarify you the accuracy of date time 2. Date time 2 accuracy is 10 nanoseconds, I believe. Anyway, I'll you can research on this and you should tell me tomorrow. Okay, now which is the date time data type which with less accuracy? Which is the date time data type with less accuracy? Okay, it is small date time. It is small date time, not date time. I repeat again, the accuracy of small date time is 1 minute. The accuracy of date time is 3.3 milliseconds. The accuracy of date time 2 is 100 nanoseconds. Okay, so now let's try to understand. Just a second. Yeah, I know that it is around 100 nanoseconds. Let's try to confirm that. Okay, so date time 2, the accuracy is Yeah, it is correct. So the accuracy for you can see here, the accuracy for date time 2 is 100 nanoseconds. Okay, now anyway, so which is more accurate? Date time 2 is more accurate because it is even storing nanoseconds, but date time will only store milliseconds. Small date time will only store minutes. So depending on your requirement, you have to choose the data type, appropriate data type. Okay, so I'll quickly summarize what we have discussed for the day. So let me open this PDF. So first thing, we started with logging into SQL Server, and we saw that there are two types of authentications: Windows authentication and SQL Server authentication. And I have not explained more on that, we'll see that later. And then after logging in, we created a database, create database 24th May batch or whatever, and inside the database we have created table employee, and we saw that what is the use of identity column, and we also saw constraints on primary key, which is unique for a particular record, which is unique for among the table. And we saw that primary key will not allow null values, and also primary key will not allow duplicate values. And then we saw not null constraint, where you cannot insert null value for that particular column. And we also saw identity column, which will have two things: one is seed value and the increment value. And then we learned about integer data type and varchar data type, where varchar will allow varying data types. And then we saw check constraint, where you want to restrict a particular column not to allow some values. So we saw that salary should be greater than 0, check constraint. We also saw age greater than 35, less than 35. And also we saw we got input from Sharin saying like employee ID also we can have a check constraint. And Kavita has explained about primary key, the points. And then now we saw date time, date variables. So date time, small date time 2. These are the data types which we have in SQL Server for date time. And we saw that small date time the accuracy is less, 1 minute, and date time the accuracy is 3.33 milliseconds, and for date time 2 the accuracy is 100 nanoseconds. Okay, and also we saw that if you want to get the current date and time of the system, you need to give select get date. And then at the end of the course, end of the class, we saw that we can declare the variables using declare. How to declare in SQL Server? We saw that we declare like this: declare variable name and data type. Declare variable name, data type. And for assigning, we can even give select, or what you can do is you can actually give set. For example, you can even, okay, I'll explain that in the next class. So this is about today's session. So tomorrow we'll see more about, not tomorrow, in the next class we'll see more about data types, other data types, and we'll see about writing required queries. Okay, so that's all for today. Any questions you have, or any suggestions, any questions? Hello? Okay, so yeah, so I'll take okay, so I think I have all your mail IDs. So what we'll do is we'll stop here, and I'll try to troubleshoot the issue which